One of the strangest moments after getting your license is realizing someone actually trusts you enough to get in the aircraft with you, because suddenly the flying, it feels different. Not because the aircraft has changed, not because the weather's changed, but because now it's not just about you anymore. And I think almost every new pilot worries about the same thing. What if they hate it? What if they get sick? What if I mess up? So in this video, I want to talk about taking your first passengers flying, how to make it enjoyable, what mistakes to avoid, and how to make someone actually want to come flying with you again. Hi, I'm Dale, and this is Left Seat Culture, a channel about flying, gear, and the culture of aviation. Most of what I cover is general aviation, but hopefully it's of interest to all pilots, whatever it is that you fly. Now, one thing nobody really tells you during your training is how different flying with passengers feels compared to flying with an instructor or flying solo. During training, everyone in the aircraft understands aviation. Your instructor expects radio mistakes, they expect slightly rough landings, they understand turbulence, and they know essentially what's normal with flying. When you take a passenger, they don't. To them, every bump feels significant, every noise sounds important, and every slight unstable approach could feel quite dramatic. And honestly, I think that's why new pilots often feel more pressure taking friends or family flying than they did during their skills test. Because now you're not just flying the aircraft, you're managing somebody else's confidence, comfort, and trust. I genuinely think the biggest mistake new pilots make with passengers is trying too hard to impress them. Trying to make the flight exciting, trying to prove that they're a real pilot, or trying to make it look super smooth, professional, and impressive. But the reality is your passenger probably doesn't care how accurately you track a heading or really how good your radio calls are. What they really care about is how they felt. Did they feel safe? Did they feel included? Did they feel calm? And did they feel comfortable? That's really the kind of things that they're going to remember afterwards. And the goal of the first passenger flight isn't to impress them. It's to make them willing to come flying with you again. And those are very different things. This is probably the most important advice in this entire video. Choose the weather for passengers' comfort, not for legal minimums. Because a flight can be technically safe and still be an absolutely terrible passenger experience. The CAA passenger guidance actually talks about this as well. Even warm sunny days can still be turbulent or hazy, which might not make for a really enjoyable flight. For a first passenger flight, pick a calm day with good visibility, smooth conditions, ideally not too hot, and keep things simple. Honestly, one smooth evening flight around the local area is worth far more than some ambitious cross-country in marginal weather. And never put yourself under pressure because people have made plans. I think that's a really important one. Passengers often don't understand how weather dependent general aviation flying is. So if you tell someone we're definitely flying on Sunday, you've accidentally created pressure for yourself, and that pressure can ultimately lead to bad decisions. I know the temptation. You've finally got your license and you want to fly somewhere impressive, you want to do a land away, route around some landmarks, perhaps even squeeze multiple airfields into one single flight. Don't. For most passengers, especially first timers, shorter is 100% always better. Honestly, a 30 to 45 minute flight is usually more than enough because passengers get tired much faster than pilots do. There's new noises, perhaps excess heat, headsets they're not used to, turbulence, obviously different motion, even potentially the smell of avgas. It's a very different environment to them flying on an airline. And I completely agree with the CAA guidance on this. Leave them wanting more. Now, this is one area I think new pilots either massively overbrief or they barely brief at all. Now, you don't need a 10-minute airline style safety demonstration, but you absolutely do need to brief a key things. Those are seatbelts, doors, headsets, those sterile cockpit moments when you don't want them to be speaking, making sure that they keep clear of controls, and how to exit the plane in an event of emergency and doing that safely, as this matters more than most people realise. because passengers don't know when your workload is high, and so they're often going to ask questions in those key moments during taxi, when you're lining up, during the climb out, during joins, or when you're already really busy. So it helps to simply say, there are moments where I need to focus for a minute or two, and I'll explain afterwards any of your questions. Now that single sentence removes a lot of awkwardness. Also, another thing, don't assume passengers understand airfield safety. People don't naturally understand the dangers of a propeller, even if it's not started yet, where they're supposed to walk, where not to stand, and how busy an airfield can actually be and feel. And honestly, escorting passengers to and from the aircraft with the engine shut down is just good practice. Never feel tempted to have people board and exit the aircraft with the propeller running. It's just too much risk, in my opinion. Okay, I think this is a big one. Avoid the temptation to demonstrate kind of extreme things. Don't do any steep turns, any aggressive maneuvering, no abrupt climbs, or look how capable this aircraft is by doing a 60-degree banker turn, because even modest bank angles can feel uncomfortable to non-pilots. And I think this is something pilots forget very quickly. Most passengers have no frame of reference for any of these things, so a normal training steep turn to us can feel really extreme to them. And honestly, smooth and calm usually impresses people far more anyway. The flights passengers remember positively are normally the ones where the weather was nice, the view was good, they felt so relaxed, and the pilot looked calm and in control. Not the flights where the pilot tried to prove something and perhaps made them scared, sick, or worse. There's also a lesson here that I'd like to share with you from kind of my experience motorcycling as well. When people on motorcycles ride in groups, there's a phrase you'll hear a lot, and that is ride your own ride. In other words, don't try to keep up, don't push beyond your comfort level, don't ride differently just because somebody else is there. And honestly, I think exactly the same thing applies in aviation, especially when you are flying with another pilot, more experienced friends, or people you subconsciously want to impress. Because the temptation is obviously to do things that you wouldn't probably really be doing. Those temptations could be flying faster, accepting weather that you normally wouldn't, rushing approaches, kind of having tighter margins, or try to look more experienced than you really are. Because in my opinion, that's where the mistakes are going to start creeping in. Your passenger should never change your decision making for the worse. In fact, it should probably make it even more conservative. And flying with another pilot can sometimes feel surprisingly uncomfortable early on, because maybe that other pilot, they fly differently, maybe they brief differently, maybe they use different techniques. It can feel like you're being slightly or silently assessed the whole flight. So if you are flying with another pilot, I think it's completely reasonable to say something up front like this. Hey, if you notice anything you'd do differently, feel free to mention it afterwards constructively. Because there are often multiple perfectly safe ways to do things in aviation, and just because somebody does something differently doesn't automatically mean you're wrong. As long as you're operating safely, legally, and within your own personal limits, then there isn't really anything to do. So like I said, fly your flight. Safe pilots don't try and impress people. They make good decisions, and they make those good decisions constantly. So this is another thing pilots worry about far more than they probably need to. Motion sickness, it happens, and it doesn't necessarily mean somebody hates flying. Honestly, just normalizing it can really help massively. Saying something like this to your passenger: if you feel uncomfortable or unwell at any point, tell me early. That's it. Don't need to make it dramatic. People often will feel embarrassed anyway, so just my tip is make no drama about it, because the worst thing is when passengers stay quiet trying to be polite until they suddenly feel really terrible. And if someone does feel ill, then do a few easy things. Level the aircraft, reduce or minimize the maneuvering as much as possible, try and get some cooler air flowing into the aircraft, talk nice and controlled and calmly, and if needed, just land the aircraft. no passenger has ever complained that a pilot made a sensible decision. And I also recommend that you take some really good vomit bags. I'll put a link in the description. I recommend these because they're absorbent, the smell goes and it's not sloshing around and everything. Just a good tip. So I also think this is a really important part. Your first passenger flight probably won't be perfect. Maybe the landing's average, maybe the radio's a bit messy, maybe you forgot something small. But don't worry, that's completely normal. We've all been there and it probably won't be the only time this happens. But what the passenger actually remembers is usually much simpler. Did they feel safe? Did they feel included? Did they enjoy the experience? And did the pilot appear to be calm? And weirdly, some of the best first passenger flights are actually the simplest ones. As mentioned already, a smooth evening, a relaxed local flight with a nice view, that's often enough. And the reason for that is because most non-pilots, just being in a light aircraft is already incredibly memorable. So have you flown with any passengers yet? Or do you remember your first passenger flight after getting your license? Please share your stories below. I'd love to hear them. And if you found this video useful, give it a like and subscribe to Left Seat Culture for more GA insights, flying tips, trips and discussions. And if you want to carry on the discussion, join our Discord. It's completely free and there's a link in the description. If I'm really lucky, I'll see you in the next one. Until then, take care of yourself and goodbye for now.